All right, let's jump right into this explainer, where we're going to transform some pretty dense source material into a true top-down masterclass on the management philosophy of information security. If you're an aspiring information security manager, a GRC consultant, or a future CISO, well, you're exactly where you need to be. We're going to ditch the hyper-technical jargon for a bit and focus on deep, fundamental understanding rather than just rote memorization. We want to teach you exactly how executives and organizations like ISACA expect you to think. The ultimate goal here? Making absolutely sure that every single security decision aligns perfectly with your organization's broader business objectives.
Think of this explainer like a fast-paced university syllabus. We're covering 1. The paradigm shift, 2. Governance, 3. Risk management, 4. The security program, 5. Incident management, and we'll wrap it all up with 6. The executive cheat sheet. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The paradigm shift. Security is a business function. We absolutely have to shatter this outdated misconception that security is just some isolated IT issue. It is first and foremost a continuous business management system. Security doesn't just exist so we can deploy cool, flashy technology or stop hackers in a vacuum. It exists to support business objectives, hit regulatory obligations, and manage enterprise risk. Look at these 4 CSM domains. They aren't separate, silo chapters. They're one continuous, unified lifecycle. Governance is the crown, asking, what do we need to accomplish? Risk steps in and asks, okay, what could go wrong? The program is the daily grind of how we execute those defenses. And incident management? That's what we do when things inevitably break. The output of one feeds right into the next. It's a constant, endless loop of business alignment.
Section 2. Governance. Directing the business. This is the absolute bedrock of our entire strategy.
Governance is where executives put on the crown and set the actual rules of the game. You literally cannot manage security if you're treating it like some ad hoc technical chore. Governance provides the mandate. But here's the crucial distinction you need to internalize. Governance decides what needs to happen. Management does the actual work to make it happen. So governance is your board of directors saying, hey, we must protect customer data to comply with GDPR. Management is the CISO and their teams rolling up their sleeves to actually implement the encryption and access controls to execute that vision. Never, ever confuse the two.
Picture a waterfall of authority. This hierarchy shows how high-level policy trickles all the way down to dictate every single technical control. A policy is the mandatory intent of management, the big what and why. Now, a huge trap people fall into is confusing standards with procedures. Think of it like this. A standard makes that policy measurable, like saying, we require multi-factor authentication everywhere. A procedure? That's the literal step-by-step click here, then click there method to actually turn on MFA for a specific server. And guidelines, those are just optional best practices. Always remember the golden rule. Policies drive tools. Tools do not drive policies.
You know when security usually fails? When nobody knows who is actually in charge. Accountability has to cascade it clearly. The board ensures security aligns with enterprise risk. The executives set the strategy. The CISO builds the program. But listen to this. Actually, let me emphasize this. The CISO does not own the business risk. The ultimate owners are the business owners. The data owner classifies the information and decides who gets in. The system owner maintains the actual hardware or software. But the business? The business always owns the risk.
Let's try a quick Socratic reality check. A hospital is getting hammered by phishing attacks. If you immediately thought, we need to buy a better email security tool, you've fallen into a classic trap. Despite what those shiny vendor brochures will tell you, governance and leadership visibility must always come first. If you just buy a tool, you are slapping a technical band-aid onto a management problem. You have to first ensure leadership understands the risk, policies are updated, and business owners are held accountable. Then, and only then, do you look at tools.
Section 3. Risk management. Making business decisions. Now that we have our direction, we step into the risk domain.
This exists entirely so the business can make informed, smart decisions when faced with uncertainty. This is where we weigh our security efforts against what the business actually cares about. You really need to digest these definitions. Inherent risk is your baseline. What happens if we do absolutely nothing? Imagine building a multi-million-dollar data center in a flood zone. The inherent risk? Total water damage. Residual risk is what's left over after you apply controls, like say building a massive seawall and putting the servers on the second floor. That leftover risk is what management ultimately has to accept or treat. Risk appetite is the big picture view from the board, like we accept low risk regarding flooding. Risk tolerance is the strict operational boundary. 0 servers go below the second floor, period. Your job isn't to magically eliminate all risk. It's to squash that inherent risk down to a residual level that fits comfortably inside the board's appetite.
Section 4. Security Program. Executing the strategy. Next, we transition from theory to operations. This is where the rubber literally meets the road. We are converting strategy into repeatable, funded controls. And as our source material explicitly calls out, the absolute very first step in building any program is creating a business case. You don't just buy software because it's the trendy new thing. A business case gives you the rationale. It justifies your resources. It shows senior management exactly how this program is going to provide a return on investment, manage their risks, and what it's going to cost.
Here's a massive point of confusion, and frankly, a huge trap for a lot of professionals. Treating security as a one-time project. No way. A true security program is a sustained, ongoing business capability. Think of it as an infinity loop. A project has a start date and an end date. Setting up a brand new firewall? That's a project. But the continuous monitoring, the patching, the auditing of that firewall week after week, that requires a funded, permanent program with established metrics and a drive for continuous improvement.
So imagine this real-world scenario from our sources. A manufacturer decides they want to deploy endpoint detection. Before any technical implementation happens at all, we have to ask the right governance questions. The instinct of a pure technician is to immediately ask, which vendor are we going with, or how do we configure the agent? But an executive, they think completely differently. They act as a filter. Policy and architecture have to funnel down to address specific business risks before you ever touch a keyboard. An executive asks, do we even have a policy that dictates this? Does this fit seamlessly into our existing security architecture? Are we buying this control because it's flashy or because it specifically mitigates a prioritized, documented business risk? Section 5. Incident Management, the business response. Look, eventually, preventive controls are going to fail. And that pivots us to incident management, the ultimate business preservation exercise. The key here is correctly classifying what just happened so we don't accidentally trigger a massive, super expensive business response for a routine hiccup. A user mistyping their password 3 times, that's an event. It's observable, maybe slightly unusual, but entirely routine. But a coordinated brute force attack originating from an external IP that successfully compromises an admin account? Yeah, alarms are blaring. That is an incident, and it requires immediate active containment. When a real incident kicks off, the immediate technical urge is often to just yank the power cord out of the wall or wipe the server to get back online as fast as possible. But from a management perspective, you have to carefully contain that threat under a glass dome. Preserving evidence, protecting the business, and communicating with stakeholders actually takes precedence over hastily trying to fix the system. You need those forensics for legal and HR reasons before you recover. And just as important is step 7, learning from the root cause, feeding that back into your controls, and making sure it never happens again.
Section 6. Executive Cheat Sheet, the final synthesis. Okay, let's tie all these threads together.
If you can internalize these final principles, you will fundamentally understand how to manage information security at the absolute highest levels. Our recurring theme today is this: when in doubt, governance steers the ship. You must always choose the most business-aligned path. Don't just pick the cheapest control. Pick the most cost-effective one that actually aligns with the business risk appetite. Stop treating the CISO as the sole risk owner. Ensure the business explicitly accepts its own risks. Strategy must always dictate operations.
Think of this as your complete knowledge map. It's a living, breathing ecosystem. Strategy feeds governance to set the requirements. Governance gives direction to risk management. Risk steps up, prioritizes what matters, and funds the program. The program implements the actual controls to mitigate incidents, and when failures inevitably occur, the lessons learned from those incidents go right back up the chain to the board to adjust the strategy all over again. It all comes full circle.
I want to leave you with a provocative thought to help evaluate your own organization. Remember, strategic thinking must always precede tactical action. So the very next time you're faced with a security challenge, I want you to take a step back and ask yourself, are your decisions being driven by the latest shiny technology trends or by a continuous risk-aware business management system? Ultimately, are you acting like a technician or are you acting like an executive? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this masterclass has completely reshaped how you view information security.